Today's video is brought to you by Card Kingdom, and right now you can get this sweet Scoop Soldier sticker when you order over at cardkingdom.com. Just mention in your order notes that you want a Scoop Soldier sticker when you go to checkout. Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and we're back here today for a super special video. We are counting down the top 10 Ikoria cards for the Pioneer format, and joining me as my co-host today is Krim. What's up today, Krim?
Hey Seth, I'm excited to talk about some Pioneer and what Ikoria is going to do to it.
Yes, I am excited for this as well. Ikoria got a lot of power. I think it's going to make some waves in the Pioneer format. We got some really interesting cards to talk about, so I guess we'll just jump right into it. Oh yeah, before we do, one thing we did want to mention real quick was on our list, you will not find the land cycle from Ikoria, and even though it probably would be deserving of a slot pretty high on the list, just based on how much play it might see, its power level, we decided it's not especially interesting. So know that the lands are very good. People will play them in the Pioneer format, but they're not on our list intentionally. Also, this is our combined list. Me and Krim each made a top 10 list, and then we kind of mashed it together for the video. If you want to see our individual lists, they will be up on the article in this site. So you can check out our full top 10 lists there as well. So anyway, Krim, are you ready to count down the top 10 Pioneer cards from Ikoria?
I sure hope so. So let's get into it.
All right, coming in at number 10 on our list, we have a companion, Loras of the Dream Den, and this card's pretty interesting. So companion-wise, all your permanent cards have to be converted mana cost 2 or less, which is a pretty big restriction, but then you can cast a permanent with converted mana cost 2 or less from your graveyard each turn, and you get a 3/2 lifelinky body for just 3 mana. Krim, what do you think about this one?
See, I think this card is medium at best. This isn't as high for me on Pioneer, just because I can't think of what deck really wants to play. Like, I'm guessing like mono black aggro, but then you're losing out on things like Murderous Rider, Rankle. So like, it has to be some kind of low to the ground zoo deck, right? And then you just keep reoccurring it. Like for me, this one is just medium. Like maybe I play it as a fair creature, right? As opposed to like the companion side of it. I probably wouldn't build with this companionship in mind. I would just play it in the deck normally.
That is actually 100% why I'm excited for Loras, is I don't think most decks, or actually I went pretty deep looking through Pioneer decks in regards to this card. I'm not sure if there's any deck in Pioneer that can just easily play Loras as its companion, but I do think that its effect, kind of being this Snapcaster Mage every turn almost, a mini Snapcaster Mage for permanence, I think that effect is powerful enough that we'll see decks just playing this as a 3-drop. I mean, a 3 mana 3/2 with lifelink, those are reasonable stats, although I'm a little sad that it's 2 toughness, so it gets in like Stomp range and Shock range and Wild Slash range, but being able to just recast something that costs 2 or less from your graveyard each turn in a black aggro deck, even in like a Heliod white aggro style deck, I feel like that's where Loras actually offers the most potential, not warping your deck to meet its companion clause, but just running a couple copies fairly and getting value from your graveyard that way.
I could definitely see that. When you think about it just from a fair perspective, the card is definitely playable. So, I mean, and like you had mentioned, it being 3 mana means that it does dodge Fatal Push. It does die to all the shocks and burn-based thing, but it does dodge Fatal Push, which is one of the most popular removal spells.
Yeah, that is an upside, and triggering Revolt, little tricky in Pioneer, so it is a big upside needing to have Revolt on the Fatal Push to actually get rid of it. So we'll see. I think, for me, it reminds me a little bit of Emry, and how Emry kind of does the same thing. Once a turn, you can cast an artifact from your graveyard in a 3-drop that gets cheaper, but still has even a worse body. And Emry has seen a lot of play all the way back to Legacy, I believe. I think Loras can have a similar effect if you just like erase the companion box from it and think of it like this weird like mini Sun Titan or something that keeps letting you play your cheap permanents over and over again.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, let's move on. Number 9 on our list, we have a little removal spell in Heartless Act. And this might seem like a weird spell to be excited about for the Pioneer format, but Pioneer's removal, honestly, is not all that great. Like, Doomblade is not actually in the Pioneer format. Heartless Act, I think, is the best at what it does. Is 2 mana slightly conditional removal in the black colors. I think it beats out the other options in the format. What do you think about this one, Krim?
I think this is the removal spell that Pioneer has been in need of, because like it's pretty hard for like Fatal Push to catch everything, right? We had just mentioned that something at 3 CMC, harder to trigger Revolt. The drawback on this one doesn't even feel like a drawback at all. What counters can we think of right now? Like maybe if like a Heliod runs wild, then this card does not like do as much, because like Heliod puts a counter on stuff, or like whenever you can like gain life, sure, or maybe like a Walking Ballista. But outside of that, I feel like this hits everything in Pioneer.
And it's really funny that some of the creatures that it technically can't hit with its first mode because they have counters, like Walking Ballista, Hangerback Walker, Stonecoil Serpent, most of the time Heartless Act is going to actually be hard removal for them with the second mode. Like removing 3 counters from a Stonecoil Serpent, Hangback Walker, Ballista is usually going to put it down to a 0/0 and have it die anyway. So even some of the creatures that you think that it probably shouldn't hit, it actually does end up hitting, more or less.
Yeah, completely true. So like, yeah, like those cards that I just mentioned aren't even a problem anymore, right? So I don't know. I love this card, right? It is an amazing removal spell for Pioneer. Like granted that like other colors need better removal spells in Pioneer, but like this is huge.
Yeah, it definitely is. I think this will see a lot of play in Pioneer and kind of fill that gap between, I guess, Fatal Push as your 1 mana removal and Murderous Rider as your 3 mana removal. This is the 2 mana spell that can fill that gap and actually really help out Fatal Push, which does struggle against some threats. I don't know how many times I've had a Fatal Push in hand and got beaten down by like a Steel Leaf champion or something, and just like, oh my god, this is the worst. Heartless Act takes care of those situations, and Galtas and Uros and all the other massive creatures that you have to face sometimes in the Pioneer format.
Agreed.
Let's move on. Number 8 on our list. And this is one that you might remember from our standard countdown, Parcel Beast. But I am even higher, I think, on Parcel Beast in the Pioneer format. So, Parcel Beast, 4 mana, 2/4, whatever. The big deal is it mutates for 2 and you can tap it and pay 1 and draw cards or put lands on the battlefield. The reason I am super high on this card is Pioneer's a mana dork format. There are a lot of decks built around Gilded Geese, Llanowar Elves, Elvish Mystics, Arboreal Razors, all those cards. Like, that is kind of the foundation of a lot of decks, and Parcel Beast seems perfectly suited for those decks. You play your Mana Dork on turn 1, then you play Parcel Beast on turn 2, and then all of a sudden you have this 2/4, which, as we've been talking about, dodges Fatal Push, even dodges bigger removal spell if your opponent's playing like a Lightning Strike or something like that. 4 toughness is huge. It shuts down all the aggro decks of the format. Like, I almost think this card could be even higher on our list. I think this card is uniquely situated in the Pioneer format. But I've been rambling, Krim. What do you think about Parcel Beast?
I think it might be one of, if not the best uncommon for Pioneer from Ikoria. We were talking about in Standard how powerful it would be to curve into this, right? But obviously the 1-drops in Standard are going to be Arboreal Grazer and like Goose, right? But as you had mentioned, in Pioneer, we have so many 1-drops that you could put this onto. Like, so this is huge, and it's nothing more needs to really be said other than, like, if you go turn 1, whatever, and then turn 2, attach this to it, oh man, you're set up for your next batch of turns.
And yeah, I mean, it seems incredibly strong. Good on defense, generating card advantage. I'm definitely excited for this one in Pioneer. Let's move on to number 7 on our list. Speaking of Pioneer being a Mana Dork format, we got a card that really likes Mana Dorks. Kinnan Bonder Prodigy. Krim, why don't you talk a little bit about this new mana doubling creature?
So it is a green and a blue, and it's whenever you tap a non-land permanent for mana, add 1 mana type, add 1 mana of any type that permanent produces. And then you can pay 5 and Simic. So 5 green and blue. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may put a non-human creature card from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So we already had issues with, like, Leyline of Abundance, right out the gate of the format. This feels like a Leyline of Abundance attached to a creature almost, right? Because all of those Mana Dorks will now add 2 mana. They will, or at least add what, like, that's insane, right? Like, I mean, we go turn 1 mana dork, turn 2 like this, and then or whatever, another mana dork, and then turn 3 you drop this. It's insane. Like, I think it's just a lot of value. Like, all your stuff just starts adding 2 mana, which does lead to like mono green super friends or whatever you want to call it. They play all mana dorks, and then they just ramp out a bunch of Nissas, Karns, and Vivians and Planeswalkers. They may have just gotten a way to get into it a little bit easier. Of course, the activated ability is the only thing that makes it so that the super friends decks may not want to play it. So we're waiting for some big mid-rangey, ramp reliant green deck.
Yeah, with a bunch of mana dorks. And I think that's true. The upside on Kinnan is really high. We saw Leyline of Abundance, as you said, be broken in Pioneer to the point where it had to get banned. So that is the upside of the card. It's a nice mana sink. Worst case, that 7 mana ability, you run out of cards in hand, you got nothing going on, you get all this mana because you're playing all these mana dorks. Worst case, you get to spin the wheel and hopefully find something. So you're never going to waste your mana once you get up to 7. My only concern with Kinnan is it's a 2/2. And unlike Parcel Beast and some of the other cards where we've talking about how well they line up with the removal in the Pioneer format, Kinnan's kind of the opposite. It dies to Stomp, it dies to Fatal Push, it dies to Wild Slash, it dies to all of the removal. Maybe it's a case where the decks that'll play this just have so many cheap threats that you have to deal with that maybe your opponent, you just overload your opponent essentially and they can't have enough removal spells to deal with all the things they need to deal with, and Kinnan survives. But that is my slight bit of concern, is it is pretty fragile and it does die to all the heavily played removal in the format.
It does get hit by literally everything, but this is, if not, like, this is definitely one of the cards where it's like you cannot let them untap with this.
Yes, it is pretty frightening, especially in a mana dork deck. Bad things will happen if your opponent untaps with this card. Even discounting the 7 mana ability, just like casting Nissas and Vivians and Karns and whatever, maybe Ulamogs and huge like Eldrazi. There's a lot of things that can go wrong if your opponent untaps with the amount of mana this can make.
Oh man, and yeah, this just puts the creature, like, the activated ability is huge, so yeah.
Well, let's move on. Number 6 on our list. And I know this is one you were pretty high on, Krim, actually. I know for me, I was not super stoked about General Kudrow in the Pioneer format until you started to talk to me about the things it might do there. So what do you think about our new legendary human lord with a bunch of different upsides on it?
This does a lot. It's 1 and a white and a black. Other humans you control get +1/+1. General Kudrow of Drawnneth or another human enters the battlefield under your control. Exile target card from an opponent's graveyard. And then pay 2, sack 2 humans, destroy target creature with power 4 or greater. We can now maybe, like, we've already seen, we had talked about it a little bit earlier, we've seen some human decks running around, right? Getting some 5/0s here and there. We've seen mono white with the Heliod combo. Well, now they could just go a little more human-centric and have the Heliod combo, right? You could play Thalia's Lieutenant. You can even play 3 mana Thalia. And then we start getting into the territory where are we going to start seeing more multicolored things? Because then if so, Hero of Precinct 1. So, like, there's a lot that goes on in Pioneer, and I think General Kudrow will be huge for the format. Being able to exile a graveyard and, like, attach to a lord means you could play this main deck. So you're shutting down things like you're delaying the Lotus Breach decks. You know what I mean? Like all the Emery things, all the cheap, like all the Uros. Like, there's just so many things you could do with this card.
Yeah, I think that even though Humans hasn't really taken off in Pioneer to the extent that it has in Modern, like you said, we have seen human decks starting to crop up, and General Kudrow just does so much. Even discounting the Human Lord ability, which is obviously nice if you're being aggressive, exiling cards from the graveyard, there's a lot of Uros and Croxos running around in Pioneer, along with even like inverter decks that need cards in their graveyard to set up the inverter combo.
It disrupts Dig.
Dig through time, just incidentally keeping the graveyard empty, very powerful in the Pioneer format, and I even think the removal has some upside to it. It's the best part of it is it might allow you to play 4 copies of General Kudrow, or at least more than 1, even though it's legendary, because worst case, if you Kudrow flood, you can sacrifice Kudrow and something else, take down some big creature, and then just play another copy to replace itself. So I think it's a little speculative just because humans are kind of like third tier right now, but General Kudrow is definitely a push up for the deck in the format for sure.
Correct. I mean, like the small aggro decks playing like mono white decks have a decent amount of like creature types already in there. You just line it up to where you play more humans, and then Thalia's Lieutenant starts getting played again, and those decks had an issue with like Siege Rhino out of the Niv Mizzet decks or Niv Mizzet itself, and now you have something that can just kill it, right? So maybe there's a Hero of Precinct 1 deck.
Well, let's move on. Number 5 on our list, and I'll probably have to take this one. I know.
Yeah, this is all you. This is all you.
I am really high in the companion mechanic. I think the more I've thought about this mechanic, the more I think that just starting off with 8 cards while your opponent has 7 cards, I think that's going to be extremely valuable in games of Magic. I've used this argument in other places, but if you look at like the win rates when someone mulligans to 6, someone keeps 7, there's a pretty big advantage of having that one additional card in hand. Yarion, the reason that this is the companion that I have on the top of the list is I feel like playing 20 extra cards in your deck is the easiest restriction to me. Yes, you're going to give up a little bit of consistency, but you're gaining that extra card in hand, and I think that that is more valuable than people are realizing, just starting with an extra card in hand. I think Yarion in specific, it doesn't do anything super crazy in the format. There's not a ton of like blink decks or anything, but you don't have to blink too many enter the battlefield things to get your money worth. Even resetting like a Thraben Inspector, maybe a Charming Prince, something like that is more than enough to get your value out of the card on top of being just a free roll extra card in your hand and a 4/5 flyer. Obviously, if you have a bunch of enter the battlefield triggers and you're like Cloud Blazing or playing things with Ravenous Chupacabras, then it gets even more insane. Or like Thassa style decks that have shown up on the fringe of the format. But my argument is basically, I think this has the lightest restriction of any of the companions because you can play any card you want to. You don't have to leave out cards that your deck really needs. And I think starting with extra card in hand is going to prove to be busted. This is a pick I'm a little scared of making. I feel like when we look back on this one 6 months from now, either I'm going to look like a genius or I'm going to look like a complete idiot. So fingers crossed, we'll see what happens. But yes, that is why Yarion is number 5 on our list.
I think that if there is a deck where, like, the one thing to note though I do like about is that it is able to blink any number of other non-land permanents you own and control. So that is pretty relevant because this includes enchantments. You can because we've been seeing Orzhov, enchantment decks, like Doom Foretold decks and stuff like that. You can blink your Treacherous Blessings and your Elspeth Conquers Deaths, all your enchantments to reset them. Maybe a Demonic Pact. Who knows?
Yeah, no, that is a big upside as well. Well, we'll see. We'll see. Fingers crossed that that I'm right on this one, but I'm a little nervous. We'll find out as time goes on. But let's move on to number 4 on our list. We have Riley, the Everwise. What do you call this one, Krim?
I call it Riel. I we'll see who's right and who's wrong. I think it's Riel though. Riley? I don't know if that even. There's no way it's Riley. Like, doesn't even look. It can't be Riley.
Well, we'll find out. YouTube, how do you pronounce it? Let us know in the comments. But anyway, whatever the Is It Mythic human wizard is called,
Rio.
What do we think about its impact on the Pioneer format, Grim?
I think the decks that, like, first off, there might be some kind of like, is it prowess deck, but. Because, you have Sprite Dragon or Dragon Sprite. But I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is the Phoenix deck. People were already playing Phoenix quite a bit initially, but the issue is that it just spun its wheels often and it just like fizzled out and you didn't really do much and you only had the Phoenixes as a threat. But Riel actually can do a lot, right? Yes, sure, maybe. Riel the Everwise gets +1/+0 for each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard, and whenever you discard one or more cards for the first time each turn, draw that many cards. This is huge for the Phoenix decks. I think this does a lot. And we also, let's not forget, from Throne of Eldraine, we do have those double draw or whatever you want to call them effects. Maybe that starts seeing more play in Pioneer, but I think this card is huge for whatever Is It archetype that's going to be similar to that.
Yeah, I think any Is It spell style archetype can take advantage of it, and it does some pretty powerful things, like Cathartic Reunion good way of stocking our graveyard. You're going to redraw those cards. Even just the Royal Scions looting once a turn, like turning that into a draw 2 is really powerful. And we already have the Phoenix Shells, and as an extra bonus, the other thing that makes me put this card pretty high on my list is, again, going back to just the removal it's played in the format. We have another 3 CMC creature, dodging Unrevolted Fatal Push. We have another 3 toughness creature, dodging stomps and shocks and wild slashes. So it actually seems very possible to me in a lot of matchups that this might stick around for a few turns. And if this sticks around, even just drawing a couple extra cards each turn off Royal Scions, Cathartic Reunions, that's going to add up, and you're getting this like Crackling Drake style body. It is on the ground, so it can be blocked, but still, it gets pretty massive, and some of those prowess decks already play like Crash Throughs, other ways to give it trample.
Oh, yeah.
So I could definitely see someone just getting smashed for like 10 or 15 damage from this as well.
Yeah, I think this card is absolutely great.
Let's move on to another card that I think is absolutely great. Fiend Artisan, a Golgari Mythic, only 2 mana for a 1/1, but it gets +1/+1 for each creature in your graveyard, and then you got this weird sort of Birthing Pod-esque ability, an expensive Birthing Pod. You can sack a creature, paying a Golgari Hybrid and X to search your library for a creature with converted mana cost X or less, put it on the battlefield. So Crim, what are we doing with Fiend Artisan in the Pioneer format?
I like this in the Sultai midrange decks, because it's able to like play Satyr Wayfinder, fill the yard very easily. Like, I was already saying, like, I think this just being a 2 mana 3/3 will already be good. It'll already be good stat wise, right? Like, if you can make it a 3/3, it's already worth. On top of that, you throw in that Poddish effect, and now those Sultai Uro decks already play the Dimir Inverter combo inside it, right? So now you can go grab the pieces that you need. I think that's huge. And on top of that, or maybe like you need to go get a Rex Sage or something along those lines. And now you have a way to get to all your sideboarded creatures.
Yeah, I think you can definitely use it to tutor up Silver Bullets, and I feel like it's pretty easy to just make this really massive in some of the decks that'll want to play it, where you mentioned Satyr Wayfinder. There's also cards that see play like Citrus Supplier, and with these cheap graveyard filling cards, it's really easy to like play a Citrus Supplier, mill for 3, sack it to Fiend Artisan for 2 more mana, mill for 3 more from it dying, get another one to mill for 3, and then when that dies, mill for 3 more, and then all of a sudden, you're gonna have a Fiend Artisan that's gonna be like 10 power or something, and just be the biggest thing on the battlefield, combined with snagging your Kalidases, or Ishkanas, or Tireless Trackers, or Courser, whatever silver bullets you need for a given situation. So the fact that it's going to be so big and offers this silver bullet value puts it pretty high on my list. And we do have, as you said, like Sultai decks that could already play it. There's even some like green-black Traverse style shells out there that could potentially play it. So I feel like there's some decks
too. Like, I mean, we're talking like decks, Prized Amalgam, Haunted Dead, all of that. Like, there's a lot.
Yeah, so I feel like there's a lot of potential homes for this card in being the biggest 2-drop on the battlefield, unless you get hit by Graveyard Hate, and having the flexible tutor ability. I think when you mash those things together, you end up with a really scary and powerful card.
Agreed.
Let's move on. Number 2 on our list. And we have, once again, the Titan's Nest. 4-mana Sultai enchantment, gives everything essentially Delve. Crim, how does this one line up with the Pioneer format?
It's weird because like this card, I feel like I'd mentioned in the standard video that like the older the format, the more this card kind of like dwindles on power level. But the thing here is I do really like this in Pioneer still, just because of the ability to add Delve. Like, I mean, Delve is good no matter what, right? When you attach it to stuff, it's always going to be good. Like we've already seen Dig Through Time, Treasure Cruise flex its muscles and like power. So now you take that and you just add it to, I don't know, Questing Beast costing 2 mana, right? Like there's lots of things you can do here. Or maybe I don't know, you want to cast a Zatalpa or an Agent of Treachery, tons of Sultai ramp decks, or just, play your Planeswalkers. I think this card is huge. And the Surveil every upkeep is amazing. I mean, sure, it doesn't do anything when it hits the board, which is very important in Pioneer. When you're paying 4 mana, it needs to do something when it hits the board. But untapping with this is like insane.
Yeah, I mean, like we were talking about with Fiend Artisan, it's pretty easy to fill your graveyard if that's what you want to be doing in the Pioneer format, so not too hard to fill your graveyard. The Surveil effect helps fuel itself and also potentially helps fuel other, like, actual delve spells, like Dig Through Time, which is still illegal in the format. So you have that as a possibility. And then, I don't think it takes that much to get value out of this card. Even just, like, being able to have explosive turns where you're playing your, like, Uro for -1 mana. There's some decks playing, like, Ashioks and Atrices. Like, even just getting those down to 2 mana instead of 5 mana, I think instead of casting one big spell, this is gonna enable turns where you untap on turn 5 with Titan's Nest, and you just go like Satyr Wayfinder, mill some cards, Ashiok, Atris, your go opponent, or leave up a removal spell and eat to extinction, or whatever removal spell you're playing. You're gonna have these hugely explosive turns, and it's just so easy to keep the graveyard going. So even though the format doesn't have fetch lands, I think this card has potential to be pretty powerful in Pioneer. Well, let's move on. Number 1 on our list. We have another enchantment, and this one is a little more speculative, I think. This card, to me, I feel like it has the highest ceiling, probably by a pretty big margin of any card we've talked about. If there's a card that we're talking about getting banned in Pioneer, probably going to be Song of Creation at some point. At the same time, it doesn't have a ton of, like, super obvious ready-built homes in the format, at least in my opinion. But Krim, what are you thinking about this one in the Pioneer format?
Much like you said, I think this card is very powerful. But my concern is, where does it go, right? I mean, we don't have, like, there's no crazy deck yet. I mean, I think maybe, like, Lotus Breach is one that could play it. Like, I mean, obviously it wants to keep all of its cards, but usually it just kind of goes off all in one turn with, like, you know, hidden strings, yada, 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 right? It just does all of that, and then you know the rest. So, like, right now, though, whatever deck that can find a use for this, like, once it does find a home, it will be, because, like, this is a build around for sure. I think this is a build around, and it is very good. It is very good. Just gotta find a right home for it.
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see, because once you get back to Pioneer, unlike Standard, you do start to get, along with some of the homes you talked about, more free spell type stuff. You have access to, like, Ornithopter type effects, Hangerback Walkers and Walking Ballistas, a lot of ways that you can try to build a combo deck around this card to really play through your entire deck. There's even more once you get back to, like, Modern and Legacy, but you start to see those type of effects in the Pioneer format, and I feel like this is a card that has a power level where it's going to take people a little bit to figure out some of the less obvious homes for it, but it has so much power that it's a card that if someone can figure out the right home, it could be the next Dimir Inverter or something, the next Heliod combo, where all of a sudden we're like, wow, like, this deck came out of nowhere thanks to Ikoria and is suddenly at the top of the meta. I feel like Song of Creation is that card. So outside of some of the, like, Stormish style decks that we already have in the format, like Lotus Breach combo, I don't know exactly where it's going to fit in, but someone's going to figure out how to take advantage of it, and I think the card's going to be incredibly strong when they do.
Yeah, maybe it's like a Temur Spells Matter Phoenix style deck, and, like, maybe Riel goes in it, and, I mean, like, how does that work with Riel in the last part there, right? Because, I mean, it goes to the end step, you discard your cards, and then you draw all those cards.
Yeah, so you draw back all of your cards immediately. So maybe a spell slinging deck like that. Plus, I mean, if you're playing a Phoenix deck, you don't mind cards going in your graveyard. We have cards like
Oracle.
Don't mind Uro going in the graveyard. You have Oracle, you have Underworld Breach in the format to get things back from the graveyard. So there's a ton of possibilities of how to either, like, directly take advantage of discarding cards, like with Riel, or just not really care about discarding cards. If you discard 3 Phoenixes, like, sure, that's fine. I'll untap and cast some spells, from the graveyard and go to town. So there is some upside there as well.
Agreed.
Anyway, I think that brings us to the end of our top 10 Pioneer cards from Ikoria. So, Krim, thanks so much for doing it.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks to everyone for watching, and make sure to let us know in the comments, what Ikoria cards are you most hyped about for the Pioneer format? What do you agree with on our list? What did you disagree with? How do you say Riel or Riley?
Riel.
Let us know in the comments.
You made a third way to pronounce it. It's Riel. I think it's just Riel.
Thanks so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed it, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, help us out by clicking that like button down below. And to keep up on all the latest and greatest, click that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to get alerts whenever we have new videos. And if you want to, check out some of our other sweet videos here and here.